It's the Fellowship of the Geek Show, a weekly podcast about comics, the comic book industry, and other geek pop culture. Music courtesy of Manny the Martyr. And now, on with the show!
Hey there, everybody. It's the Fellowship of Geeks podcast. My name is Thomas Schick, and joining me for this episode is Mike Marlowe.
Hey, gang.
And Les Webster.
Hello, all.
Liz Newman could not join us this week. She is under the weather, and we're wishing her a speedy recovery, and hopefully she'll be with us next week. So how are you guys doing?
Fine. How are you?
Doing okay. Hope everybody out there is doing all right, staying safe, staying home. Things seem to be getting a little bit better, but we've still got to be patient and hang in there. So what's been going on in your corner of the galaxy?
Yeah, pretty much that. Trying to keep calm and carry on and all that business, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Fortunately, I am admittedly very lucky in that I have a job which allows me to work from home, and so I'm good. Of course, I also have a wife who has a job that's a little bit high risk, but you know, it's all good so far. We're doing all right. But let's see. My brain just took a left turn on me. Yeah, pretty much. I have, and the problem with the reason for that is that I haven't really done a whole lot this week. The one thing, I guess, interesting or different, or however you want to look at it, is that since we normally kind of read enough comics to keep, or I at least read enough comics to keep me busy for the week, I tend to get behind on stuff like Kickstarter books that I buy. And so I kind of realized that this week, and I was like, hey, I should try to knock down some of this backlog of Kickstarter books. So I kind of did that. I spent a good chunk of, actually, I guess that was this morning, doing that. And so specifically, I guess, or I say specifically, and I'm going to be real vague. In one of Madeline's Kickstarters for Boston Metaphysical Society, actually in all of them, she usually puts together a bundle of stuff from other creators as part of the crap. What's the term? I'm blanking.
Goals or
Stretch
pledge? Stretch goals. Yeah.
Stretch goals. She tends to put together a bunch. I mean, we're talking like 15 or 20 comics. Like they're usually individual comics that people have given her permission to ship out to people.
Nice.
And yeah, so I kind of knocked out one of those this morning. Just it took a little while because there was, like I said, 15 or 20 of them. And they're just it varies wildly how what kind of stuff is in there. There's some fantasy stuff. There's obviously some steampunk type stuff, some mysteries, even a couple of superhero books. It's interesting to see because they're usually new creators or creators who haven't really hit the big time yet, and so they're basically Kickstarter buddies of hers. And so she puts them together, and they kind of trade stuff back and forth and work out. I don't know what kind of deals they work out, but I think the intent is mostly for exposure, but it ends. The end of the bargain that you're on when you're backing a Kickstarter is you get a kind of a chunk of new and interesting stuff to look at. So it's kind of fun. Not everything is wonderful and brilliant and beautiful, but it's interesting to see kind of it's a nice way to kind of get a feel for what the kind of stuff that's out there and how much it varies, and it might pop a few names into your head that you might go hop on Kickstarter and take a look and see, maybe find their websites or something, you know, that sort of thing.
I think that's a great idea. it gives exposure to these creators that they may not have otherwise, other than someone stumbling across their own Kickstarters and go, hey, that's a pretty cool idea. I like that. I think I'll support that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a cool way to kind of share the audience in a way.
Yeah.
Kind of spread. I mean, not everything is going to stick with everybody, but something will stick
No.
somewhere along the line. And
Yeah.
And you've introduced somebody to something new, and it's cool.
That is cool.
And who knows? There may be a book there. You go, you know what? I'm not interested in this, but hey, I know so and so. This is right up their alley, and then maybe they can pass it on, and maybe there's a new reader there. Who knows? I mean, I think that's an awesome idea. All right, Les.
Well, being the slug that I am, I sat in front of the TV for the most of the time.
Woo! I'm jealous.
And scrolling through movies, I decided, why don't you pick a particular actor or writer or director, something like that, and just see what you can find.
Mm-hmm.
And I chose Jim Wynorski, one of my favorite directors. And I watched 2 of his movies. They were like parts A and B. And it's about a young man. First movie, he's in high school. And he is at high school and fights terrorists. In the second movie, he's at the university and he fights terrorists. The first one is called Demolition High. The second is called Demolition U. And they both star that action hero, that action star, Corey Haim. And I just shook my head. I thought, this is horrible crap. Because they are similar in structure and how you get from point A to point B, and both end similar at point C. So I slugged my way through it. Actually, I slogged my way through it. And it was fun to me to locate movies by director. And Wynorski has always been one of my favorites. And he has a group of people, group of actors that he uses a lot. So I got to see people like Peter Spellos, the character actor that just cracks me up every time I see him. Because the guy tries to do his best. And it still lacks a bit. But I recommend that to anybody if they have a particular actor, if they want to see Tommy Wiseau. We've already talked about him before, but type in Tommy Wiseau and see what movies he's got on Prime or Netflix or something, and just go through it, see what happens. You'll be pleasantly surprised at the listing that you'll find, and the availability of those movies.
Pleasantly in quotation marks, right?
Sure.
Well, I mean, picking someone like Stanley Kubrick, that's not,
Yeah.
There's no challenge there. There's
Right.
nothing interesting. You're not going to learn, well, I mean, clearly you could learn something from Kubrick, but I can see where it's more interesting to pick maybe a less well-known director or something, Or, I mean, I might aim a little higher than Tommy Wiseau, but
True.
but I'm not less either. So, I mean, he likes that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, after the last couple of weeks, I think the obvious choice would be Dick Miller.
Yeah.
Nobody's got that kind of time on their hands. Holy cow!
Oh, come on.
You watch 500 freaking movies. I wish I had that kind of time on my hands.
Well, Les does, probably.
Pretty much so. Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
No, that's about it.
Okay. All right. Well, I just didn't want to step on toes or anything like that.
Well, that's fine.
Skype toes.
There you go. Speaking of the documentary Dick Miller, I did see that Tubi has it. I've not had a chance to watch it, but it is on my queue. I have been spending some time on Tubi this past week. Caught a couple of documentaries, so I've been kind of on that kick, thanks to you guys. The first one is kind of near and dear to me. It's called Plastic Galaxy, and it is the story of Kenner and the original Star Wars toys back in the 70s. And it kind of discussed how when Lucas was working on trying to get a deal to do the first Star Wars films, he was looking at who would want to do the toys, and basically all the big names were just not interested. But Kenner at this time had some moderate success with like the Easy Bake Oven and that kind of stuff. And they looked at this and like, you know what, let's just give it a go and all that. And it talks about how they had access to see the movie before it had been released and all that, and just how the designers and all that were just floored by what they saw and the potential. And the thing they talk about how crazy things got was, you know, obviously the movie exploded and there was a demand for merchandise. They hadn't started working on the toys yet. And they're like, well, we got to get this stuff out for Christmas, which, you know, they need to be in stores by Christmas, which means they technically need to be out by August. The movie came out in May. They're like, there's no way in hell we can do that. So there was the whole concept of basically prepaying for a collector's set, and you get 4 action figures. And so basically you're paying now for something you wouldn't get until early next year if you're lucky. And you know, that's kind of crazy. I mean, that wouldn't work these days. I don't even talk about that.
You say that. Kickstarter.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
true.
it wouldn't happen on that scale that it happened with the Star Wars toys for sure, but
right. But you know, and then how they just kind of went from there, and just how the line expanded, and of course the 2 additional films, and then after Jedi, they were going, well, where do we go from here? There was the 2 animated shows, Droids and Ewoks, but there was going to be no more movies for the foreseeable future. And they're going, well, what do we do? And how things kind of, you know, turned down, you know, went down. And then back in 95, they kind of started again with this Power of the Force. And then here comes the 20th anniversary and the special editions, and then they get bought up by Hasbro. It's just a really, really interesting look at how they made the toys, how they were received and all that. And it's just a really cool look back. And the crazy thing is I'm looking at this, and it's like, I used to have all this. I used to have all this when I was a kid, and it was funny because they got to that part, like I said, in '85, where everything kind of slowed down and all that. Apparently, I was not the only one at that point going, you know what, this is kid stuff. I'm older now. I'm getting rid of it. So a lot of people did. And of course, that's stuff that now, that's high dollar. Even loose figures are worth some money. But it was a really interesting. It was a nice trip back to back when I was a kid. So it's a fun short documentary. I would definitely recommend it, especially if you're a Star Wars fan and Star Wars toys fans. Definitely check that out. The other one I watched, it's hard to believe that this happened 17 years ago, because I remember this happening and being floored by what I saw. And this chronicles the making and the story of the writer director Sandy Colera. It is called Behind the Mask: The Batman Dead End Story. This is about the fan film Batman Dead End, which basically put Batman versus aliens and Predator, and there was a Joker appearance and all this. That was so well received when it first came out. It's a nice little story about, like I said, Sandy Colera, who wrote and directed this, who was a big Batman fan. How he basically got into art design, and then actually at one point worked at Stan Winston studio for a short period of time, because he was kind of disappointed that he wasn't able to design stuff. He was pretty much doing the grunt work, where everybody else is like, you got to go through the system just like we did. So he went out on his own and started having some success, and then started talking about him really wanted to direct. He was able to do a couple of commercials, but still didn't get an opportunity to actually direct a feature film. So he actually came up with this idea of doing this fan film. And then got like one of the costume designers from the Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. So basically helped him with the costume, and then someone from the original Predator. And there was ties to the other films, and how everything got put together. Interesting bit of trivia: Sylvester Stallone was almost Batman, and they discussed this
in that.
In Batman, yes, in the short, wow. Sylvester Stallone was almost in it. He actually agreed to it. I forgot who told him. It was like, hey, so and so knows, Sly Stallone. He's a big Batman fan. Why don't you call him and talk to him about it? And he was like, okay. So the call happens. And he's like, right off the bat, he says, Mr. Stallone. And he goes, hey, call me Sly. I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting. So it's like, hey, this is what I'm kind of doing and all that. He says, well, why don't you come up to my house and we can discuss it. So he was actually at Sly Stallone's house to talk about what's going on in all this. And Stallone goes, okay, do you have permission to do this? I mean, there's got to be some issues with copyrights. He says, well, no, I don't. That's why we're keeping everything on the down low and not, making waves and all this. This is just he didn't say fan film, but it was pretty much, that's what it was. And Stallone paused a little bit and says, I'm in. He was like, oh, wow, okay. So he heads off and continues working on getting things ready. Next things he knows, he finds out that Mark Hamill is interested in playing the Joker based on the fact that Stallone was playing Batman. So it was almost Sly Stallone versus Mark Hamill for a few seconds in the film.
Dang.
And so it was like, and so obviously as you might expect, he's on cloud nine, going, oh my God, I've got big names here wanting to do this film. Well, he gets a call. It's Stallone. He's like, yeah, I'm going to have to back out of this. I'm like, why? He says, well, there's a lot I can lose here by doing this. All the risk and all that. It's like, Sly, I told you about this when I was at your house. We discussed this. He goes, yeah, I know, but I got to back out. And just as quickly as Stallone backed out, Hamill backed out. So needless to say, the film still does get made with an unknown Clark Buttram, which I watched that fan video again. And it amazed me because he literally looks like Alex Ross's version of Batman. I mean, it's that costume, almost identical, but with the muscles and all that, he looks exactly like Alex Ross's art for Batman. It was uncanny. I mean, I couldn't get that idea out of my head. And then you had Andrew. I'm always butchering his name. Keoing, Walter's son, played the Joker. And of course, the film was made, and they talk about debuting it at San Diego Comic-Con. And I know I'm taking a lot of time on this, but I'm making up for Liz's time, so there we go. So, they got things ready. It was actually been selected to be part of the viewing of the 2003 San Diego Comic-Con. And, of course, everybody's kind of just nervous and all that. And, they had spend time going around handing out little cards. Hey, we're going to be premiering this and all that kind of thing. And he talked about the fact that, oh my God, there's like nobody going in to see this. Look, that's what they were seeing earlier. But as we got closer and closer, the room filled up. And a line started forming as far back as one can see. And Les can tell you from experience, that's a long way to see. So the room apparently filled could seat 200. It was full with people standing back in the back. They premiered it. There was cheering. There was standing ovation after it was done. They cleared everybody out, got in another additional 200 people, same thing. Next thing you know, they're being told that the big event on Saturday, the masquerade, where everybody's in costume and all that, and they show all the trailers that have been premiering throughout the convention. First thing they're going to do is show Batman Get In. They're going to do that before the trailers. Huh. So now it's being shown before 5,000 people. And it's a similar response. And the funny thing is they talk about the next day, after these 3 showings, they're out running around and they're checking dealers and all this, and dealers already have bootleg copies of the film. It's like, that tells you how successful it is, because there's already bootleg copies of being sold.
Also tells you where all the pros are going. The pro bootleggers.
Right.
They're all at San Diego Comic-Con.
Right. So, of course, you talk about how the movie kind of takes off and all that, and then he starts getting offers left and right, or he's being being brought into discussions and stuff. But he was he wanted to do things on his own terms. So basically, the phone stopped ringing, people stopped asking, because he wanted to do things 100% his way. So yeah, he's kind of doing that, but everything's on a shoestring budget, and it's all his. He's still kind of making stuff, but he didn't want to be part of that studio machine and all that. He didn't want to answer to anybody else, and that cost him a big time career.
Yeah.
Which is a real shame.
And that's just the professional side, because at the same time that he's working on doing his fan film, his mother's dying of cancer. So he's feeling bad because he's spending all day there and then driving and being with her for several hours and then going home and sleeping for like 4 hours. And he was like, well, I'll cut back on doing the film and all that. I want to spend more time with you. And she's like, no, don't you dare. If you do, I will kill you. And so, he kept doing what he did. And she eventually passed away from cancer while he was filming. But so she never saw the success that he had with this film. But it's a really nice story, because it's something I hadn't I came across this like, what happened to him? Because I remember seeing this, and he did a follow up with World's Finest, which was a Superman Batman fan film, and then that was the last I heard anything, and that was a long time ago. And it's just well, now you know why. But I definitely recommend checking it out, because it was a very nice fan film. It was so well done, and you can tell by just seeing the behind the scenes stuff of how meticulous and dedicated they were to do this. And something I didn't realize as well, the Predator that they created, one of the Predators they created for the fan film about 10 years ago or so, NECA went to Fox to get permission and then approached Sandy about making an action figure based off the version of the Predator, one of the Predators they used in the film. So there's actually an action figure based off of one of the characters in the fan film.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the other thing, I'll try to speed this up a little bit here, but the other thing that I kind of really been hooked on here the last week or so is, as longtime listeners know, I spend some time watching stuff on Twitch. One of the things I've been really getting into this past week is the RP, the role playing. And I'm not talking about Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of stuff, although that's on there and it has a lot of viewership there. I'm talking about role playing on video games. This is the stuff that's been going on for a while, but the one that's kind of becoming really hot right now is a game, Red Dead Redemption, which is a Western. Apparently the role-playing servers came online within the last few months, and now they're getting, streamers are getting in there and starting playing. And I've saw some well done role playing. They're creating stories off the cuff of just stuff that's going on. It's been really good. I'm a fan of Red Dead Redemption because it looks beautiful. The cinematography in it is beautiful. The building designs look great. I mean, they look so old and torn down. I mean, you can see the dust on the floors. You can see the damages on the signs from being shot at and everything. I mean, it's highly detailed. It looks great. But the role playing, especially the last 3-4 days, have been incredible. I've really enjoyed the stories that I've been experiencing. So I definitely recommend checking those out. If you do what you want to do when you go to that particular category, Red Dead Redemption 2, is look for in the titles of the streamers. It should reference Wild West Roleplaying or WWRP. Those are the ones you would definitely want to check out, because those are the ones that are the role players.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's been kind of fun.
Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've been checking out some other role playing before, a little bit of Grand Theft Auto. I know there's some that are done with Daisy, which is a post-apocalyptic with zombies and all that. And I know there's some other ones which I'm not familiar with, but I'm sure there's more. But when I first saw Red Dead Redemption when it was released, and I kind of watched some of the gamers playing the storyline, I loved it. It looked great, and I liked the story, and I thought, this would be a cool world to experience. And obviously now they're doing that with the role playing.
Nice.
Yep.
It's cool to see them find new ways to use the technology.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who would have thought? I mean, other than obviously the craze of, like you said, D&D role playing on there. I mean, the idea that people are finding ways to branch off from that and find new and interesting ways to use it. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And these are, in the case of Red Dead Redemption, these are servers that are basically closed off and then open up every once in a while for people to apply to be added onto the servers. So they're trying to keep out people who just want to get in there and just fuck things up and
Shoot
just
everything, right?
be assholes. So they're actually and I think that's a wise thing to do. I think that's a great thing to do. That way you can get, so people are not trying to mess it up for other people who are actually trying to do the role play experience. And I think that's a great idea.
Yep.
All right. So now that I took over Liz and my time, let's go ahead and get into this week's discussion. We almost talked about this a few months back, but we felt it was wise to kind of discuss about it now, since this is the 35th anniversary?
I think it's 35, yeah.
35 of the start of this maxi series, and I mean, we could have done it earlier because of the TV ties that happened late last year and early this year. Kind of wanted to talk about the maxi series Crisis on Infinite Earths from DC Comics. This term gets used a lot and abused a lot, but in this case, I think it fits. It was a literal game changer because this changed DC Comics. This was something that it was a literal game changer. It changed everything.
I think the term they use more often now is reboot. But yeah.
Well, yeah. This was to streamline the DC universe, because at this point there was literally infinite number of universes. A lot of it was due to DC and the parent company, which I believe was National Periodicals, had bought up competitors, and instead of adding them totally to DC proper, they would just say, well, they're on this Earth or that Earth, and then go on and go from there. So this was an opportunity to bring all of that together to kind of make things a little bit more nice and neat, and go from there. So I figured for this episode we would kind of discuss the crisis itself and its impact. So on that note, I'm going to step away, and I'm going to, surprisingly, who'd like to go first? I know Mike read this recently because he was on, he discussed about this here a few months ago. Isn't that correct there, Mikey?
Yeah, right before all of it was done. Um, Josh from the Victims and Villains podcast decided to put together this massive thing where he filled up 2 whole episodes of his show and brought in different people to talk about different sections of the book, all kind of in preparation for the CW thing. So yeah, I got to read this book back in, I want to say it was November of last year. So yeah, that was fun and interesting for sure.
Fun.
Oh, it was fun.
Okay. Well, I'm not talking. I'm not questioning being on the show and all that. I was just talking about you reading the book. So
I had to read the book very quickly, but I have prior experience doing that, so it wasn't really that big a deal. It was a lot more fun after it was over than it was as I was doing it, but it's one of those things. You just do it.
yeah.
It was, like I said, it was a lot of fun being on the podcast, and
Oh yeah, I bet.
it was fun talking about some of the concepts because he kind of Josh kind of guided things a little bit, so he had some ideas in mind because he had read it very carefully beforehand as well. So in an effort to turn it into like 2.5 hours rather than, I don't know, 15 like it could be. We ain't going to go that long on this, though, that's for sure.
Oh hell no.
Oh yeah, but the deal is it's a very dense book. There's a lot of stuff going on in this book. Not surprisingly, they made a big effort to touch everything in the multiverse, which is, I mean, to touch everything in one universe is tricky enough. To try to give every character in the DC universe dialogue somewhere along the line in a 12-issue thing, it's a little crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't get a whole lot of lines, not surprisingly. Some of them really just show up in fight scenes in various places throughout the book, and you'll see. I mean, because it's everybody. I mean, it's all the World War II stuff. It's all the Western stuff. I mean, and obviously all the superhero stuff and all the cosmic stuff, and it's just all crammed in there. I am honestly, I am hesitant to go too far into it because I really want to hear what y'all think, because y'all read it a long time ago. And I'm partly curious to see how well you guys think it has aged, but I'm also just kind of curious to see what you guys think of the story in general, because obviously I have a different perspective than you guys.
Right. I would be curious to hear Les's thoughts first, because I will probably surprise people by saying I did not read this when it came out. It was not intentional, but I did not pick up this book when it was originally coming out. I mean, I read some of the other books that may have been tie-ins because I was reading those lines, so there was reference to what the hell was going on. But I did not. I read Crisis later on when it was collected, when it was first collected. That was the first time I read it, so it had been a few years. So I would be interested in hearing Les's thoughts, because I'm sure he read it when it was coming out. Unless I'm wrong.
No, you're right. I was there for each month and the issue that came out, but I want to look back at items that had appeared prior to that. What led us to the crisis, and how did we get these multiple Earths? This was first brought up in Flash of Two Worlds, when Barry Allen transposed himself to Earth 2. And that was in Flash number 123. I remember that issue. I also remember the first meeting of the Justice League and the Justice Society. That was in Crisis on Earth 1, followed by the following issue of Crisis on Earth 2. That was in 1963. So there was when I first found out that there is a second Earth at a different vibration. Later on, it was expanded to the multiple Earths that you spoke of earlier. Yes, for continuity, DC decided they would pare it down, which was a smart idea. The series Crisis on Infinite Earths, when I read it, I was amazed at the idea of getting all these characters at one location and started fighting the the Anti-Monitor, and getting to see how each character was portrayed, was handled, and how they were significant in the outcome. If I remember, they did have a few deaths, but
the body count in this book was horrific.
Yeah, it was. It was. Of course, the majors, they had 2 majors.
Yeah.
And the idea of taking those favorite characters and doing away with them, at that time, was unheard of. And this is prior to the death of Superman, or the death of Batman, which were not permanent, obviously, but the deaths of characters on other Earths, and some of those I go, no, I like that guy. Why'd you do away with him? But it was pretty important to the story to cut back on the multiple Earths idea, which again was expanded later in the Flashpoint and Convergence series, because later DC came out with their multiverse guides, which were a great way to look at it and read a comic and go, oh, okay, let me see that takes place on this Earth. I look up that Earth and see what it says the characters are and such. So it was good there.
The idea that you have to have reference books to read comics is kind of funny.
Yeah. It's really strange, but at times happens. I was pleased with it. I have not reread it in about 10 years, so I'm sure there are flaws. But at the time, it was the item to go after and make sure that I had that. And thank God the internet was not around at that time, so there were no chances of spoilers being touted. So I'm one of those. I love the Flash story. I love the Crisis on Earth 1s and 2s, and even the Crisis on Earth 3, where they met the crime syndicate. But Crisis on Infinite Earths was both artistically and story-wise amazing. The art by George Perez, and who was the writing team? Oh, it was Marv Wolfman, wasn't it?
Marv Wolfman, yeah, who wrote it.
Yeah.
It was his idea.
So that That was great. And I read them, and then I went back to my shop and I bought the collection, all 12 issues in a bag, so I'd have that also. I had my reading, I had my preserved, and I was ready to go. I thought it was great stuff. And I commend DC for doing this. Their major competitor did something similar later. But unlike you guys, I don't see it as a reboot. I don't see that this was setting up a reboot. I think it was just to clean house, spring cleaning. Let's get it over with. And that's the way I looked at it.
Well, I don't think it was a full-on reboot. There were some things rebooted. Most notably Wonder Woman and Superman. There was changes there. There was some changes regarding like the Legion of Superheroes and all that. And of course, something like that was partially due to what the changes that were made by John Byrne when he was essentially handed the entire Superman line to kind of oversee after Crisis, which I enjoyed that. I really like what he did with Superman and all that. Yeah, it was a cleanup. It was to try to make the DC universe a little bit more
manageable.
Manageable. Yeah, I mean, definitely easier for new readers, but maybe for maybe not so new, but not so old guard that were there when it originally happened, that kind of thing. And I get that to a degree. When I originally read it, and like I said, I first read it when it was collected as a trade several years later. I enjoyed the story. It kind of blew me away by the sheer, like Mike said, by the sheer number of people. The character, there were maybe characters that made one or two panel appearances, just enough for you to go, oh, they're there, and then they're gone because they've been wiped out by.
Right. Usually it's because they're dying. That's why they're on screen.
Yes. Right. Yes. Props to George Perez. Holy crap!
Oh God, I can't imagine.
And he was the sole penciler on this. There was three inkers, if I'm not correct, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there were 3 inkers trying to keep up with him.
Yeah.
I think there were 3 colorists too. I mean, just because of the sheer volume of what was going on.
Right. And so it's literally thousands of characters. 20 to 30 pages each issue for a year.
Right, every month for a year.
And some of the issues had more pages.
Yeah, some of them were bigger.
So I'm not sure. Whatever praise Perez got for this, it's still not enough because that's a hell of a job. And yes, there was 3. There was Dick Giordano, Jerry Ordway, and Mike DiCarlo. Those were inkers. Anthony Tolan, Tom Ziuko, and Carl Galford coloring. Only one letter, and there was a lot of dialogue in this thing. So special,
yes, there was.
Yeah. So special nod to John Costanza too for the sole letterer of all 12 chapters. And yeah, only one writer. Although I'm sure Perez may have had a hand in some of the story as well. Don't want to shortchange him there, but holy crap, it's an awesome task, and they did a good job. They did a great job. It's been a while since I've read it. I should have read it to kind of get prepared for this episode. I'm overdue, and I would love to sit down and read it again. I just know it's going to be a lot, so
Yeah, I'll vouch. It is a lot.
yeah,
Take your time.
yeah,
Do it slow, the slow and sure method, because pounding it into your head in a week it's challenging.
yeah. I wouldn't ask anybody to do that. So
I could have
uh,
said no.
yeah,
It's fine. It was kind of fun in its own way. Yeah, this is one hell of an event, that's for sure. Um, and I think ultimately my take on it is kind of just that, is it's a hell of an event. I agree that there is any coherent, overarching story in a concept like this is amazing. Um, that they managed to hold it together all the way through, whether some of it was kind of fluff, to be honest, along the way. I think some of the fluff was just in order to get certain characters in there in ways that they just weren't going to be able to do otherwise. And the art for this book is just unbelievable. It's amazing doesn't seem like a good enough word for it. I
yeah,
mean, that he managed to crank all of this out in the time given and have it look really damn good. I mean, this is great Perez work. I mean, honestly. Um, I mean, I think clearly he really wanted to do this. This was something that he obviously felt in his heart somehow, because there's no way. I mean, there's very few artists could do what he did in this book, um, and all of that praise and everybody else involved did a bang up job. Absolutely. Um, and I say all of that to then turn around and say that yes, it's an impressive event. I think I'm after experiencing a few events now, and honestly, even experiencing some from like 20 or 25 years ago when I was getting into comics in the first place. I never really cared that much for the events. I mean, that was like 10 years after this thing, because this and Marvel Secret Wars were like within a year of each other, and
yeah,
they're kind of the spark that started it all. Um, they decided to do these huge events, and they were successful, and so they have since decided to do one as often as they can get away with it, and honestly, sometimes more often than that. It's, I mean, it's kind of not my thing, I guess. I don't. I appreciate the level of organization, especially with Crisis on Infinite Earths. I mean, the way I kind of envision it playing out in my head. I mean, I have no idea if this has any basis in reality. Is somebody at DC finally figured out the concept of continuity and took one look at the back catalog and went, "Holy shit! There's no way. We can't do that. We have to fix this." And so they decided to pare it all down as much as they could get away with. Honestly, well beyond what they could get away with, because clearly a lot of it didn't take, because there's multiverses again. But
mhm,
so again, the idea of the multiverse died a comic book death here. But yeah, it is an awesome and impressive product for sure. I, I think it's just kind of not my cup of tea. Um, I mean, I would rate it well, honestly, just on the technical merits of it. Um, there, I have specific flaws with the story and with some of the characters, but I mean, in something this big, you can't please everybody, and I think I am especially hard to please in this kind of case. But yeah, I don't knock anything that any of these people did with this book, because it's amazing. That it worked at all is it's simply fantastic, and it worked well. I mean, just flipping back through it, I'm still amazed. I mean, most of my gripes, other than the fact that there's just some of the, just there's just so many characters that some of them have to be kind of weird, and I mean that's great. It's okay to have weird characters. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, to see Sergeant Rock and Swamp Thing in the same panel, that's fun. I I was a little bit puzzled kind of all the way through about the character of Pariah. I'm not sure I understood. I mean, I know what the actual purpose of the character was. I was a little disappointed in the execution. I would have preferred he not be so entirely one-dimensional. It might have benefited them to plant the seed of Pariah like 3 years earlier, if they could have, or hold off the event for a year or two to make Pariah interesting. I don't know. Between that and the guyliner thing, it just kind of rubbed me the wrong way the whole time. But that's a nitpicky detail too. I mean, like I said, they had to have that perspective somehow. To do it with someone already there would have been weird. I'm not sure who they could have done that with.
Right.
And then to entirely invent a new Luthor character, I mean, fine, I guess. It seems a little strange, and the way they treated him was also a little strange. I did find the dynamic between the two Supermans. I thought there was some interesting stuff there. If anything, Superman might have been the best fleshed out character in this book, partly because there were two of them. So did anything stand out to you guys in any way? Do you remember the story that well?
It's been a while, but looking at the character Pariah, was he more or less the DC answer to the Silver Surfer? Am I twisting that?
I seem to remember him being a little bit more kind of like the Paul Revere. I mean, the universe is about to end. The universe is about to end. The universe is about to end because I've been watching it. I see this one go away, if I remember correctly. Almost a Chicken Little too. I don't really want to go that route.
Chicken Little is actually closer to where I went with it. Yeah.
Right.
It would be, and this is a dangerous comparison to make probably. I almost see him as more like an angsty, whiny Uatu. I mean, as long as you don't mind, if you're going to cross, he's the guy who sees all, and where Uatu sees all and does his job and kind of goes about his business. Pariah is kind of the whiny kid brother version of that, and he's the guy who always has to watch the bad things, which was his punishment apparently. And that's a level of evil I can't even imagine at that point, if that's what you're going to punish somebody with. But yeah, so he was, like I said, they needed a character to give a certain perspective to the multiverse as a whole that nobody individually within any of the universes was going to have. I mean, it just wasn't going to be possible. It had to be somebody from outside or somebody who had been thrown out a long, long time ago. So I guess props to them for figuring out a way to make a character to do that. I still wish he hadn't been just so boringly whiny the whole time about it. But again, there's a perspective there that, I mean, not sure I could come up with a better way to deliver that message myself, but I'm not really that kind of writer, so,
I think one of y'all mentioned it earlier, the major deaths, them actually killing off Supergirl and killing off Barry Allen. I thought that was, especially Barry Allen. That's kind of incredible. I mean, and this was back then when someone was killed off, they were pretty much killed off. I mean, death means nothing now in these universes because they can be brought back in 6 months by a new writer or whatever.
Yeah, but this book came out before the 90s.
Right.
So death was real then.
Yeah. I kind of get the reason why they did that with Kara, that kind of to bring Kal-El, Superman, back to being the last son of Krypton. He was the sole survivor of Krypton, and all of a sudden he's got a niece. All of a sudden he's got his pet dog. Oh, there's also stories of him when he was a teenager and he was a superhero, and all this other stuff. And and with this, they wiped all that out, and it was like, he's it.
Right, and all of that was a cool idea at the time it was created because they were trying to kind of capitalize on the popularity of the character, and so hey,
Right.
we'll do this sort of family thing. Okay, great, no problem. And then this comes along, and they're like, okay, how do we whittle this down? Well, we kind of have to get rid of the whole family thing. He can't be the sole survivor of Krypton if he's got this large extended family.
Right.
So yeah. I also thought it was interesting. There's one little bitty scene. My weird twisted memory is telling me it's like right at the beginning of issue 4, between Supergirl and Batgirl. It's this really nice little story or little scene where Batgirl is basically telling her friend Supergirl that she's scared shitless. And Supergirl's like, yeah, I mean, we kind of all are. Even the big super powerful ones are scared to death. They don't know what's going to happen here. Nobody has any idea what's going on. And I think that gives a little bit of meaning to Supergirl dying not that much further in, honestly.
Yeah.
It's kind of a nice, it's one of those things that I was very impressed with, because they did that a couple of different times. And it's taking this completely impossibly large in scope story and weaving little pieces into it to make it an actual story, a full-blown narrative. And it's the kind of thing that impressed me along the way in the writing. It had to be little things because it's too big a scope for big things to work all that well. But there's some really nice little things in this book if you I think if you take your time and kind of cruise through it slowly, you're more likely to catch a lot of that stuff. But there's some good stuff in there. There really is.
Yeah.
And yeah, what they did to Barry was just not nice. I mean, I thought it was kind of fitting in a way, but it was not nice.
I think you're right. I think it was fitting because of the trial that had just happened. And therefore, this was a way for them to cope with that. But then the fans, of course, were just in shock that they could do that. Because, like you said, at this time, you could get away with everything. And the public, I don't think, was ready for that. I think they were content with just rolling forward. But it was you look at it now, and it was kind of a necessary thing to do. for the story, obviously, and hopefully for the public itself to learn to accept what the publisher is going to do, because by God, he's going to do what he wants anyway.
Well, you talked earlier about, thank God not having internet back then for spoilers. Could you imagine having the internet and back then and having just the barrage of, oh my God, what the hell are they doing? They did this. They did that. You know,
Oh, yeah.
How dare they? I mean, it's bad now.
Oh yeah, those thoughts have always happened. It's just that
Right.
you didn't hear them all the time.
Right.
Like you do
You know,
now.
the most you would hear is in a letter column.
Yeah, and that's just what the publisher chooses to print, you know?
Right,
I mean,
right,
that's curated at least.
right.
You don't have that now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been brutal. I also think with the Flash thing, I think there is a fascinating irony to Barry dying. Like you said, I mean, in addition to the trial and all that stuff, I think given that where all of this whole multiverse thing started was with Flash,
Yeah.
I think it's in a way, I think it's very it's very ironic. I can't think of a better word for it. That he's the one that has to die, just to stop the whole thing. He's the one who has to basically take it. He has to take the last blow. It's almost like a sentence of its own, despite and whether that's related to the trial or not, which I don't believe it really was ultimately, because it's a very meta thing for it to be there, but that it's him is fitting in that way. Doesn't make it any easier to read, but
Right.
like,
And I you know, and I hate to say that, but I hadn't thought about it that way. That it is a, you know, this whole thing, the whole multiverse opened with the Flash, and it essentially closes with Flash. I hadn't thought about that, and that's I mean, and I'm sure that was part of the intention. But I think that's awesome. It never really dawned on me, and I guess that's how slow I can be sometimes.
it's an interesting way to provide closure, and it's honestly given that it is kind of, like I said, kind of a horrible death, it's
Right.
subtle in that regard. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not stated that he started it all, therefore he's going to finish it or anything.
Right.
That would be more of a Superman line. That's not
Yeah.
the way Flash rolls. I mean, he's a hero and all, but he's not the. I mean, he can be the jokey, sarcastic, funny guy, but I mean, he still does the hero thing kind of quietly in his own way. And so that's it seems like that was more fitting in that regard. But yeah.
Would you reread it now?
Yeah,
Mike has already reread it, but
right. Yeah, I think Mike's through with it because we already know how he feels about superheroes anyway. But I would like to read it again. It's been a long time. I would like to read it and see, especially now that how much has changed since then. Because we've gone through one universe, and then to streamline things and try to work on continuity, all that, and then we've had follow-up events. Some of it was to try to fix some of the stuff that's happened in between events. Hawkman, Legion, stuff like that. And then we get to do 52, and then we have Convergence, which essentially kind of brings it all back to the Convergence, and Rebirth kind of brings a lot of that back, and some of it we still haven't truly seen yet. I mean, how old is Rebirth, and we still haven't seen a full-fledged Legion. Justice Society. I mean, we got Legion back, but but we're kind of slowly trying to bring out the multiverses again. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going on anymore. But yeah, I would like to read again. Just kind of go back and kind of think about where things were at that time and what has happened since then, and basically just kind of go back and kind of read as the event for what it was. Would you?
Yes. Yeah, I would definitely take time to reread this just to make sure that I truly understood both the magnitude and the enjoyment of reading it. I think that makes a big difference. And I want to be swept away again.
Yeah.
I know that sounds stupid, but that's the way I want to look at it. That it was key to me, and I think I could just get lost in it again.
Let me ask you this, Les, because Mike and I had the fortune to be able to read it as a collection. For you were reading it as it was coming out. So what was it? So do you remember what it was like after reading that issue, reading a chapter, and then go, oh my God, I gotta wait 4 weeks for the next issue, and go, what the hell's going on here? Do you remember that?
Yes, and that was essentially the attitude I had. I was ready for the next issue next week. But since the other DC titles were having tie-ins, I could get at least a taste of it through the year. And it may be Superman one week and the Batman or Wonder Woman or something that could have a tie-in, and that way I could keep up with it. It's similar to what DC did with their Apocalypse storyline, where the characters came to Earth and tried to take it over. So reading those weeklies gave me a little bit of knowledge, and luckily, and I'm sorry to say this, but unlike Marvel, it was not just one panel and say, okay, that's our reference to our Atuma storyline. They actually would have, in DC, they would have a page or so of story that gave you a little more background as to what was going in that 12-issue series. So I was waiting with the noted bated breath each week to find out what was going on.
Oh man, and you talk about tie-ins. Holy cow.
Oh, yeah.
I have seen a list broken down by issue of the tie-ins, and it is unbelievable. I mean, there were sometimes, a dozen, maybe 15 for one issue. I mean, not all of them were that way, but I mean, it's just because, and obviously it kind of has to be if you're going to do it that way, because holy cow, literally everybody's in this book. So it's going to touch every title somewhere along the line. But yeah, there were issues where it was like 12, 14, 16 different issues that if you wanted to keep up, you were dropping a ridiculous amount of money every month just on
True.
other books just to try to keep up.
Well, I know there's at least 3 volumes of Omnibus just of the tie-ins.
Oh, I believe it.
And I'm sure there's more. There'll be more coming out. And I've kind of debated on if I wanted to go down that route.
It's an investment. We'll put it that way.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely an investment. But I've kind of thought about it, but who knows?
But at that time, comics were not all that expensive. So I could go out and feed my habit without too much difficulty.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're already reading like half the titles anyway, you're not really adding that much. For
Sure.
sure. And the flip side of that is you kind of have to in a way, because back in this time frame, they were not doing collections of everything like they are now.
Right.
You pick it up, or you're going to miss it, or you're going to pay through the nose for it at a con somewhere along the line.
Very true.
Okay, Les, I have to ask you.
No, you really don't. But okay.
I'm gonna do it anyway. When you went in that Wednesday and you saw the cover of Superman holding Kara in his arms, what was your thoughts?
Spoiler.
Spoiler.
Well, let's say I didn't fall to my knees and cry, but it was something that was pretty touching to have that depicted on a cover like that, knowing that the character is more or less gone. Because at that time, once again, we did not have that luxury of bringing a character back without any difficulty. There was no hoops to jump through at that time. We just went, oh, okay, then Supergirl is gone. I don't know if I can go on. But of course you can. So that's about the way I looked.
So you didn't think that it was a stunt? Because I mean, up to this point, God, how many covers had a character look like they were dead, and then you read the story, and obviously it's that's not the case, but this was obviously different. So.
I did not look at it like it was an imaginary story.
Yeah.
From Superman or Lois Lane comics, because that had already passed, and to me this was a hard-hitting idea that the character was gone. No, to me it was no trick.
Considering everything else that had happened up to that point too, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't really making a habit of pulling that stunt. Well, they weren't making a habit of killing main characters, really. But
no.
Yeah.
They were probably trying to generate drama with the cover, but still, it's a different ball game. This book made it a different ball game.
Yeah. Do you think it was a mistake to do that as a cover, especially since it was a kind of a surprise, or hey, we already saw all these other characters die, so
No, I took it as it was an actuality at that time. This was real, and I know it's not now, nor has it ever been, but I just felt like it was something not to be questioned, and I thought that, well, the sun will rise again, but I didn't lose sleep over it either. I didn't look at it and say, oh my God, I'll never be able to wake up in the morning, because that's crock shit. I did not see it as a gimmick in any way, shape, or form. I just took it and moved on.
It is an interesting choice in terms of putting that on that cover. Whether there was a better choice or a worse choice, who knows? But there was definitely a choice made there. I find it hard to believe it got that far through the process as a mistake. So somewhere along the line, I think somebody decided, okay, let's just go ahead and put this right on the cover. I wonder if the intent was maybe to try to soften the blow a little or something. I don't know.
No, I think they made it harsh. I think that it was one of those moves that made it a little harder, but it was also understood, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the whole we're not pulling any punches idea.
Yeah.
Shit's about to get real. I mean, as real as comic book characters can get, but yeah.
Yeah.
The drama was real.
Although I did get mixed up when they decided to do that construct of Supergirl and make her do the bidding of Luthor. That was a little tough to take, but
Yeah.
All right. Well, any final thoughts before we wrap this up and take a quick break?
If you haven't checked it out, you should. I mean, if nothing else, comic book people talk about this book all the time, even now. So it's important. Take your time reading it, though, because, like I said, there's a lot of stuff in there.
this one will not go away.
Yep, I agree. It's definitely worth checking out. All right. On that note, we will take a quick break and be right back. And welcome back. We're at the portion of the podcast where we, in an effort to help out comic book stores that are they're not getting new comics just yet. It looks like some are starting to start slowly but surely hit stores, but trying to help them out with material merchandise that's already in stores. We were going to go ahead and do titles that you may have missed. So with that, I believe Mikey's leading off.
I believe that's the plan, yeah. So I am picking a title from Image Comics, and it is admittedly one that I've talked about maybe ad nauseum a little bit before, but that's because it's so damn good. And the book is called Pretty Deadly. This is by Kelly Sue DeConnick and Emma Rios. And this is a book. There have been 3 volumes. I do not know if they're planning on a 4th one. I'm not sure. I have not heard one way or the other. But they are kind of, they include some of the same characters, but they're kind of 3 individual stories at varying times in history. But they are, I hesitate to say that they are like nothing else you've ever seen in a comic book before, because that sounds actually way more cliche than this book is. It is I almost want to call it an event, but that's not really what it is. It's the kind of book that I think everybody should at least take a look at. It's mostly centers on the concept or varying different concepts on death. And both the writing and the art are nothing short of spectacular. This is this is a group of comics creators at the top of their game. This is, I mean, my opinion is this is easily one of the best books in the last 10 years. And so, I'm hesitating to describe it any further because it's actually kind of difficult to describe. It kind of has to be experienced. Again, that sounds cliche, but that's a failing of me, not the book. So yeah, it would be best to start with volume 1, but if you had to grab volume 2 or 3 instead, do it. Go read this book.
Nice.
I agree with you.
Yep. I do too. I am next, and for my choice, I'm continuing a theme that started with last week's pick of a collection of Silver Age stories. But I wanted to point this out to those in the audience who may have watched Doom Patrol on the DC Universe. There is a collection of the first stories from the Silver Age. There's probably a couple of volumes out at this point, but I really recommend checking this out because it's works of Arnold Drake and Bruno Promenade. The volume 1 collects My Greatest Adventures 80 through 85, and which was later renamed the Doom Patrol 86 through 95. So the formation of the team and some of their classic villains, such as Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man, Brotherhood and Evil, and so on and so forth. Really, a really fun read. I mean, all the characters that are on the show, they're not all in this, obviously, but it kind of gives you a grounding where things came from. And like I said, it's just a fun read. So definitely check it out.
Cool.
It is a good read. I remember reading that several months ago and thoroughly enjoyed it. It's pretty on spot.
Yeah. Les.
My first choice is a title that came out last year. It is Mystery Science Theater 3000, the comic. I enjoyed this because they didn't stray far from the TV series. The trick is that they took the characters from the latest incarnation for Mystery Science Theater and made it so it seemed like they were sucked into comics. And what was really interesting about this one is that they were able to take old comics and insert the characters in the stories and also the artwork for the characters to match the stories. So it was pretty friggin' interesting how they were able to gear that so the artwork looks similar to those of the EC comics or the Black Cat comics, things like that. So the snide comments are made with a small circle at the edge of either the speaking balloon or the thought balloon, so you know that they were riffing at that time. And it was a 4-issue series. It's in a collection now, and I do recommend what they've done with it. It's pretty unique.
Yeah, I enjoyed this. I really did. And I thought it was a nice. When they first announced it, I was like, how are they going to do this? So I thought it was great that they actually took it and did it as, well, we're going to rip old comics, public domain comics, I believe, but they were what they were using.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was. I enjoyed the heck out of it.
Yep, it was pretty dang good, and I agree the way they incorporated the characters into the existing books. I think they did a really nice job of doing that.
Yeah. But we do have Liz's pick. So who would like to mention Liz's pick?
Oh, I'll do it.
Oh, okay.
So that you don't have to do all of the rest of the talking. So Liz's pick for this week is actually not strictly a comic book, but that's okay because it's an art book by a comic artist. It is called The Sequential Art of Amanda Connor. It was put out by DC Comics 7 or 8 years ago. And it is a collection of in a way, kind of a greatest hits collection in terms of just the art itself, focusing on that. And she is a huge Amanda Connor fan, and honestly, I think most of us are anyway. Also.
Yeah, we are. Mm-hmm.
And there's some really pretty stuff in there. And so if you have any interest in kind of just the art aspect of it, and if you have any interest in some of the characters that Amanda Connor has drawn, and there's kind of a lot of them, I think Liz kind of got hooked on her through the Harley Quinn stuff, but she's done a ton of stuff, and a lot of it is really awesome. So check out her art book.
Yeah, go ahead, Les.
I was just going to say, good cover.
Mm-hmm. Of course, these should be available at your local comic book store, and more than likely your store is offering customer pickup, or are willing to ship to you. If you're close enough, they may even offer deliveries. By all means, please reach out to your local comic book shop. Try to help them out through this time if you can. They would appreciate any business you can help. If you've not picked up your pull list from prior to the current situation, please pick up your pull list. Help them out. Support your local comic book shops, and while you're at it, if you can, support comic book creators. A lot of comic book artists and writers have Patreon. They have websites where they're offering some of their previously published material for you to purchase. Help them out because they're not getting paid either right now. So definitely just try to help them out if you can.
Yep.
All right. Any special shout-outs this week?
Don't think so, other than Liz, hope you're feeling better next week.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
I agree, and if you get a chance, read some of the stuff that we talked about tonight. Take some time, see if you can find the Crisis series.
Yep, it's pretty much a staple, so most comic book shops are going to have, like, even if it's just one copy, they'll have it available.
Mm-hmm. And just a reminder that all of our picks, whether they are new books or books that are currently out, are made available on the website as well as in our show notes. If you go to the website, www.thefellowshipofthegeeks.net, click on the picks link, and you'll see a listing. Every week we put out a list of our picks. So definitely check them out, and please pick up some of our recommendations and help out your local comic book shop.
Yep.
Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and get into our regular shout-outs. First off, I want to thank Pop Goes the Culture Podcast Network. Starting to get tired, sorry. For allowing us to be part of a great group of podcasters. Definitely check them out. There will be a link in the show notes. We also want you to check out the fine folks that make up Potter and Family on Twitter. Check out some of their shows. Easiest way to do that is do a search, hashtag Potter and Family, one word, and just scroll through, and whatever catches your attention, please click on that link, download that episode, and hope you have a blast listening to that show. I also want to thank Manny and Marta for supplying the music to our podcast. We'll have a link in the show notes for you to check out their fine music. Some great stuff. Thank you guys, as always. And finally, you, dear listener, thank you for listening to today's episode. We always appreciate your support, and we value your feedback. Any comments, questions, suggestions, complaints, observations, what have you, please reach out to us. There are several ways you can do that. Our email address is email@thefellowshipofthegeeks.net, or you can go to the website and click on the About Us tab, and there's a contact form that you can fill out there. You can reach us through Facebook, and please follow us there, The Fellowship of the Geeks. We're obviously on Twitter, @FellowshipGeeks. If you'd like to follow our personal Twitter accounts, you can do that. Mike can be found @MikeyGeek. Liz can be found @LN_geek. And I can be found @TomTCGeek. And from wherever you download and check out our episodes, if you take a couple of moments to rate and review our show, that would be awesome. Thank you very much. Anything else before we say goodbye?
Just thanks, everybody.
I just want to say I appreciate you listening.
Thank you for listening, everybody. We do appreciate your support as always. And until next time, geek on, my friends.
We thank you for listening to the show. Comments, suggestions, and questions can be sent to email@thefellowshipofthegeeks.net. You can follow us on Facebook @The Fellowship of the Geeks and on Twitter @FellowshipGeeks. Until next time,